April 29, 1945. A cellar beneath a shattered farmhouse near Augsburg, Bavaria. The world has been reduced to the smell of damp earth, stale sweat, and the fine, chalky dust that sifts down from the floorboards with every tremor. For 3 days, this has been the universe for 19-year-old Helga Richter and the other women of her unit. They are, or were, Nachrichtenhelferinnen des Heeres, signals auxiliaries for the German army. Their job was to connect calls, relay coded messages, to be the nervous system of a command post that no longer exists. Now they are just bodies huddled in the dark, listening to the Reich's last ragged breath being drawn above ground. The rhythmic, guttural cough of a German MG-42 has fallen silent. It has been replaced by a sound that is lower, more methodical. A deep, grinding rumble that vibrates through the packed dirt floor and into your bones. It is the sound of an M4 Sherman tank, then another, and another. It is the sound of the end. Helga presses her cheek against the cold stone wall, her fingers tracing the frayed collar of her gray wool uniform. The fabric is stiff with mud, and something she hopes is not blood. Beside her, a younger girl named Leni is openly weeping, her sobs muffled in the crook of her arm. On the other side sits Inga, a decade older, a harsh, cynical woman from Berlin, whose face seems carved from weary disapproval. She isn't crying. Her eyes are fixed on the cellar door, her expression a mask of defiant exhaustion. The hunger is a living thing inside them all, a hollow ache that has moved past pain and become a permanent state of being. For weeks, their rations had been thin turnip soup and slices of black bread that tasted more of sawdust than rye. For the last 72 hours, there has been nothing, only sips of brackish water from a shared canteen. Then a new sound, boots, heavy, deliberate, crunching on the rubble outside. Not the familiar clatter of German hobnails. These are heavier, softer. A voice shouts something in a language that sounds both alien and terrifyingly familiar from the propaganda films. English. The words are sharp, guttural, incomprehensible. The cellar door scrapes open, and a blinding slice of gray daylight stabs into the gloom. Silhouetted against it is a figure, broad-shouldered, holding a rifle, a Garand, its shape unmistakable, cradled casually across his chest. He is a giant, an invader from another world. More figures appear behind him. The Americans have arrived. A wave of pure animal terror washes over Helga. Every story, every newsreel, every warning from her commanding officers floods her mind. They are barbarians, gangsters, degenerate criminals who will show no mercy. Leni's weeping intensifies into a choked gasp. Inga, however, slowly, deliberately, gets to her feet. She brushes the dust from her skirt with a practiced, almost dismissive motion. Her voice, when she speaks in German, is raspy but steady. It is over. Get up. Helga feels a tremor in her knees as she forces herself to stand, pulling Leni with her. One by one, the dozen women in the cellar rise, their faces pale and smudged with dirt in the sudden light. The American soldier gestures with his rifle. Out. Rouse. Let's go. His German is crude, heavily accented, but the meaning is clear. They file up the broken steps, blinking against the painful daylight. The world outside is a canvas of ruin. The farmhouse is a skeleton of charred beams. The sky is a uniform, joyless gray. More soldiers are there, dozens of them. They are so big, taller and broader than the German soldiers she is used to seeing, many of whom are now old men or boys. These Americans are young, but they look well-fed. Their movements are confident, almost lazy. They chew gum, their jaws working rhythmically, their eyes scanning the women with a mixture of curiosity and utter disinterest. They are not the slavering monsters she expected. They are just men, tired, dirty men who have won. Sergeant Frank Kowalski of the 45th Infantry Division watches the women emerge. He's seen it all by now, from the beaches of Sicily to the forests of France. But this is different. So many women in uniform. He nudges the private next to him. Look at them, barely kids. They are herded into a loose formation in the muddy farmyard. An officer asks in fluent German if they are Wehrmacht. Inga steps forward, her chin high. We are auxiliaries of the German army. The officer nods, makes a note on a clipboard. The process is absurdly bureaucratic, shockingly calm. There is no screaming, no violence. Just the quiet, efficient mechanics of defeat. Helga's terror begins to recede, replaced by a profound, disorienting confusion. This was not how the end was supposed to feel. They are prisoners now, property of the United States Army. As they are marched toward a line of waiting trucks, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach feels sharper than ever, a stark reminder that while her war may be over, the battle for survival has only just begun. The journey is a jarring, rattling ordeal inside the canvas-covered bed of a GMC CCKW truck, a vehicle the American soldiers call a deuce and a furf. The women are crammed shoulder to shoulder, swaying with every lurch and bump as the truck grinds its way along a road pockmarked by artillery shells. Helga sits pressed between Inga's bony hip and Leanie's trembling frame. Through a gap in the canvas, she catches glimpses of her homeland as she has never seen it before. It is a landscape of ghosts. Charred skeletons of panzer tanks lie twisted in ditches, their long guns pointing uselessly at the sky. Villages are hollowed-out shells, their church steeples shattered. Everywhere there are columns of people moving. German soldiers in ragged uniforms, hands held high. Civilians pulling carts laden with their meager belongings, their faces blank with shock. This is Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods, not as a glorious myth, but as a muddy, miserable, grinding reality. The American guards in the truck with them are silent. They sit by the tailgate, rifles held loosely, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a young man with freckles, takes a silver-wrapped bar from his pocket and begins to eat, a Hershey's chocolate bar. The sweet scent drifts through the truck, an agonizing perfume of a world of plenty. It is an act of casual, unconscious cruelty. Helga watches his jaw move, the way he savors each bite, and the hunger inside her transforms into something bitter, a venomous envy. Leanie starts to cry again, a low, defeated whimper. Inge glares at the soldier with pure hatred. "Look at him," she mutters in German, her voice low and sharp. "The fat pig, feasting while the world starves." Helga says nothing. She just watches, mesmerized. The soldier, oblivious, finishes his chocolate, crumbles the wrapper, and tosses it from the truck. After what feels like an eternity, the truck convoy rumbles to a halt. The canvas flap is thrown back. Everybody out. The command is impersonal, devoid of malice. They are in a large open field, hastily enclosed by coils of concertina wire. In the center stands a collection of pyramidal tents and a few wooden administrative buildings, a temporary prisoner of war enclosure. The scale of it is staggering. There are thousands of people here, not just soldiers, but men in the black uniforms of the SS, teenage boys from the Hitler Youth, and old men from the Volkstor militia. And now them, a small island of gray uniformed women in a vast sea of defeated men. The processing begins. They are lined up, and their names, ranks, and units are recorded by a bored-looking American clerk who seems annoyed by their accents. They are made to empty their pockets and surrender any personal items deemed to be weapons, a small pocket knife from one woman, a pair of sewing scissors from another. Helga has nothing but a folded photograph of her parents, their smiling faces a relic from another lifetime, and a worn copy of Goethe's poems. An officer inspects the book, flips through the pages as if searching for hidden codes, then hands it back to her with a shrug. The gesture is so mundane, so devoid of the expected brutality, that it is deeply unsettling. The entire procedure is cold, methodical, and bureaucratic. It is the efficient processing of human cargo. They are searched by female military personnel, American women in crisp uniforms, whose movements are firm and professional. They are not unkind, but they are not friendly either. They are simply doing a job. Helga feels a flush of shame as foreign hands pat down for uniform, checking for hidden documents or weapons. It is an invasion of a different kind, not violent, but clinical. It strips away the last vestiges of her identity as a soldier, as a German, as a person. She is now just a number, a name on a list. POW 734. As the sun begins to set, casting long skeletal shadows across the muddy field, they are finally led to their designated area, a section of the compound sectioned off for female prisoners. It is nothing more than a patch of trodden grass surrounded by more wire. There are no barracks, no beds, just the open sky and the cold, damp earth. The guard who escorts them gestures vaguely at the ground. "This is it. Stay here." And then he leaves. They are alone, a small cluster of women, shivering as the evening chill sets in. The vast humming machinery of the American army has swallowed them whole, and as darkness falls, the only certainty is the profound gnawing emptiness in their stomachs and the terrifying uncertainty of what the dawn will bring. The first few days in the temporary POW camp bleed into a monotonous gray blur. Time loses its meaning, marked only by the slow crawl of the sun across the Bavarian sky and the deepening chill of the nights.
Their world is now defined by the sharp, metallic glint of the concertina wire that surrounds them. Beyond it, the American camp operates with a relentless, purposeful rhythm. Jeeps and trucks move in constant streams. Men shout orders. Engines roar to life. It is the sound of a victorious army, a sound that serves as a constant reminder of their own powerlessness. Inside the wire, there is only waiting. Their enclosure is a barren patch of earth that quickly turns to mud in the spring rains. They huddle together for warmth, sharing the few blankets they were issued, their conversations dwindling to whispers. Rumors spread like a fever. Some say they will be shipped to America to work in fields. Others whisper that they will be handed over to the Russians, a fate that sends a ripple of genuine fear through the group. Inge scoffs at it all. "Believe nothing," she rasps, her voice a perpetual sneer. "Hope for nothing. It's simpler that way." Lenny, the young girl, has fallen into a state of quiet despair, her eyes wide and vacant. Helga finds herself in the role of reluctant caretaker, forcing Lenny to drink water and trying to shield her from Inge's corrosive cynicism. The most dominant feature of their existence is hunger. It is a constant, dull throb that overshadows every thought, every sensation. Twice a day, an American guard brings them their rations. It is a thin, watery soup, usually made from potatoes or cabbage, served in tin cups. It is barely enough to sustain life, and it does nothing to quell the deep, cellular craving for real food. They drink it slowly, scraping the last drops from the cup with their fingers, the meager warmth doing little to fight off the gnawing cold. The soup is supplemented by a small piece of hard, dry bread. It is sustenance, but it is not nourishment. They watch the American guards eat their own meals with a kind of detached fascination. The men sit on ammunition crates, opening cans with P-38 can openers, scooping out thick stews, beans, and meats. The smells that drift over the wire are torturous, phantom feasts that make their mouths water and their stomachs clench in protest. One afternoon, a new piece of American equipment is set up near their enclosure, a canvas lister bag, a large suspended sack filled with chlorinated water. A soldier demonstrates how to use the spigot. The water that comes out is clean, with a faint chemical taste. It is safe. This small detail strikes Helga as profoundly strange. The propaganda had always depicted the Americans as careless and decadent, yet here they were, taking meticulous care to provide purified drinking water to their prisoners. It is an act of organized, impersonal hygiene that seems at odds with the image of the brutish invader. Inge, of course, is suspicious. "It's probably poison," she mutters, though she drinks it anyway, her thirst overriding her paranoia. Helga spends hours watching the guards. They are not the leering caricatures from the posters. They are mostly young men, consumed by a boredom that seems to match her own. They smoke cigarettes, read worn paperback books, clean their rifles with methodical precision. They rarely speak to the prisoners, and when they do, it is with a detached professionalism. Sergeant Kowalski, the man who oversaw their capture, sometimes supervises the food distribution. He has a tired face, his eyes holding a weariness that transcends nationality. He never smiles, but he is not cruel. He simply carries out his duties, his movements efficient and economical. Helga begins to see him not as a monster, but as a cog in a vast, incomprehensible machine, just as she had been. On the fourth day, something changes. A different truck pulls up near their compound in the late afternoon. It is not the usual water or soup truck. This one is loaded with wooden crates. 2 soldiers begin unloading them, stacking them on the ground. The crates are stenciled with unfamiliar words: U.S. Army Field Ration C. The women watch, their curiosity piqued. The usual soup time has passed, and the ache in their stomachs is sharper than ever. What is this? A new kind of ration? Lenny looks at Helga, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Inge just crosses her arms, her expression fixed in a grimace of disbelief. "Don't get excited," she warns. "It's probably soap or insecticide." But as the soldiers pry open a crate with a crowbar, the object they pull out is not a bar of soap. It is a small, rectangular metal can, painted a dull olive drab. It is heavy, solid. The soldiers begin to pass them out, one to each woman. Helga takes one. It feels cold and dense in her palm. The label is simple, printed in black letters. She can't read the English, but she can make out a few words. Meat and something. It is food, real, solid food. A murmur of disbelief and excitement ripples through the women, a spark of life in their exhausted eyes.
The can feels alien in Helga's hand. It is a dense, compact object, its olive drab paint cool against her skin. It has no obvious way of being opened. There is no lid to pry, no seam to break. It is a puzzle box containing a mystery. The women cluster together, turning the strange containers over and over, whispering in confused German. "What is it?" Lenny asks, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "How do we open it?" Inga taps her can with a fingernail, the sound a dull thud. "It's a trick," she insists, though her eyes betray a deep-seated curiosity. They want to see us struggle with it, like monkeys in a cage. Sergeant Kowalski, watching from the other side of the wire, seems to sense their confusion. He lets out an exasperated sigh, then walks over to the fence. He holds up a can of his own and points to a small metal tab on the side. Tucked underneath it is a thin metal key. He mimes the action, inserting the tab of the key into a slot on the can's rim and then turning it, a strip of metal peeling away with a quiet, satisfying zipping sound. He holds up the open can, then gestures for them to do the same. A few women fumble with the mechanism, their fingers stiff and clumsy from the cold, but soon the air is filled with the sound of metal tearing, of seals being broken for the first time since they were packed in a factory thousands of miles away. Helga manages to get hers open. As the last bit of metal peels away, a scent hits her. It is rich, salty, and intensely savory. It is the smell of meat, real meat, and fat. She stares down at the contents. The can is packed with a solid, pinkish-red substance, marbled with streaks of white fat. It looks nothing like the gray, gristly boiled beef she remembers from years ago, before the rationing became severe. This is something else entirely. It is strange, foreign, and its aroma is so powerfully enticing that her stomach aches with a desperate, sharp pang of hunger. She looks at Inga, who is staring into her own can with a stunned, silent expression, her cynicism finally broken. Lenny is already scooping a small amount out with her finger, her eyes wide. There are no utensils. Helga uses her thumb to pry a small piece loose. It is firm, but yields easily. She lifts the morsel to her lips, her heart pounding with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. She hesitates for a moment. What if Inga is right? What if it is a trick? But the smell is too overwhelming, the hunger too profound. She places the meat in her mouth. The sensation is electric. Imagine you have subsisted for months, for years, on a diet of watery turnips, sawdust bread, and the occasional sliver of horse meat. Imagine your palate has forgotten what real seasoning tastes like, what true substance feels like. Now imagine a sudden, overwhelming explosion of flavor. The salt is the first thing that hits her, a sharp, crystalline shock to her system. It is a level of seasoning her body has not experienced in what feels like a lifetime. Then comes the richness of the beef, preserved in its own fat. The texture is soft, almost melting, coating her tongue with a layer of savory gelatin. It is not just food. It is a concentration of energy, of calories, of a kind of industrial abundance that feels almost supernatural. Helga's eyes close instinctively. Her entire consciousness narrows to the single overwhelming experience of that one bite. It is so rich she can barely swallow. It is the most delicious, most shocking, most intensely flavorful thing she has ever tasted. She opens her eyes and looks around. The other women are having the same reaction. No one is speaking. The only sound is the quiet, almost reverent act of eating. Some women are crying silently, tears tracking clean paths through the grime on their cheeks as they slowly, carefully consume the contents of their cans. Lenny is eating with a desperate urgency, as if she fears it will be taken away. Even Inga, the woman of iron and vinegar, is methodically scooping out the corned beef, her face a blank mask of astonishment. Helga takes another bite, and then another, forcing herself to go slowly to make it last. Each mouthful is a revelation. This is not a luxury item. She knows this instinctively. This is a standard ration. This is what the Americans feed their common soldiers. And now, this is what they are feeding their prisoners. The thought is so staggering, so utterly world-altering, that it stops her mid-chew. It is more than just a meal. It is a message. The rich, fatty, salty meat is a testament to a power she cannot begin to comprehend. A nation that could afford to pack this much energy, this much wealth into a small metal can and distribute it by the millions, to its own army and to its defeated enemies, was not a nation on the brink of collapse. It was a nation that had already won the war in ways she had never even considered. The taste in her mouth is not just of beef. It is the taste of a truth so profound and undeniable that it makes the whole world tilt on its axis.
The silence that follows the meal is heavier and more profound than any that came before. The frantic, desperate energy of starvation has been replaced by a deep, physiological calm, the likes of which none of them have felt in years. They sit in small groups, the empty red and pink stained cans resting on the ground beside them like strange artifacts.
The overwhelming richness of the corned beef has left them in a state of stunned lethargy. Their bodies, so long deprived, are struggling to process the sudden influx of fat, salt, and protein. But it is their minds that are truly reeling. Helga stares at her empty can, running her finger along the inside to get the last salty traces. She thinks of the German army's standard rations. The Eiserne ration, the iron ration, was a stale biscuit and a small tin of preserved meat, but that was something you saw in the early years. Lately, it had been nothing but thin soup and bread. She remembers her brother, a soldier on the Eastern Front, writing home about slaughtering the unit's horses for food. He had died near Stalingrad. She looks across the compound at Sergeant Kowalski, who is now leaning against a jeep, smoking a cigarette. He is the enemy. He is her captor. And he has just given her a meal more substantial than anything her own army had provided in over a year. The disconnect is a physical shock, a cognitive dissonance so powerful it makes her feel dizzy. The entire foundation of her world, the narrative she had been fed since she was a little girl in the League of German Girls, begins to crumble. They had been told the Americans were a decadent, mongrel race, their society rotten from the inside, their industry collapsing under the weight of Jewish bankers and corrupt politicians. They were told that Germany, with its superior will and racial purity, was destined to triumph over this decaying system. It was the central, unshakable truth of her existence, and a single can of processed beef has just proven it to be a colossal, ridiculous lie. Inga finally breaks the silence. Her voice, usually so sharp and laced with sarcasm, is quiet and hollow. "They feed their prisoners," she says, almost to herself. "Better than the Führer fed his own soldiers." She does not say it with anger or bitterness, but with a tone of dawning, horrified realization. It is a simple statement of fact, an admission of a truth so obvious and so long denied that speaking it aloud feels like a blasphemy. Lenny looks up, her face streaked with tears. "It was so good," she whispered, as if confessing a sin. "It was so rich." Helga looks from Inga's shattered cynicism to Lenny's naive bewilderment. She sees her own confusion reflected in their faces. This food was not an act of kindness, she understands that. It was an act of logistics. It was the mundane, everyday output of an industrial engine so vast and so powerful that her own country's war machine was a sputtering candle in comparison. Germany had built its war on an ideology of strength and will. America had built its on steel, on oil, on production lines, and on cans of corned beef. There was never any contest. The entire war, the millions of dead, the ruined cities, her brother's frozen body in a Russian field, it was all for a cause that was doomed from the start. Defeated not just by armies, but by factories. She looks up at the sky, a vast, indifferent expanse of gray. The wire fence no longer feels like the boundary of a prison. It feels like the edge of a world. On one side was everything she had ever known: the songs, the rallies, the uniforms, the belief in destiny, the shared sacrifice, the hunger. On the other side was this, a world of unimaginable, casual abundance, a world that could pack meat into a can and ship it across an ocean to feed its captives. The war is not over because German soldiers have laid down their arms. It is over because the fundamental premise of their fight was a fantasy. They had been starving for a lie. Sergeant Kowalski flicks his cigarette butt into the mud. He glances over at the women, his expression unchanging, and then turns to talk to another guard. To him, this was just another Tuesday, another distribution of sea rations. He has no idea that he has just detonated a bomb inside Helga Richter's soul, shattering an entire worldview. The future is a terrifying void. She has no home to return to, no cause to believe in, no idea what will happen to her tomorrow. But for the first time, in the strange, satisfying aftertaste of salt and preserved meat, she feels the faintest, most terrifying flicker of something new. It is the beginning of a profound and painful freedom.